when you're at 5 minutes, or do you want a warning, or how would you like time to?
Please just give me a warning at like 3 minutes.
3-minute warning. So like, is that okay if I do that? Is that a like 3-minute warning? That's enough. Okay.
Okay, so I think it's really interesting that as a group we've spent a lot of time talking about homesteading. I find it like really curious that a group of teachers would end up having so many conversations around this. I guess it's interesting for me because I farm, and I kind of see homesteading as a subset of that, or like as a gateway. And so I've been thinking a lot about the gateway animals, which for our group seems to be chickens. But I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about my gateway animal, which wasn't chickens. It was bees. And a lot of that has to do with like the fact that I'm still envisioning that my ideal space, like my ideal piece of land, or where I want to be in this huge country that we live in. That's a really big decision for me. So the way I started to approach this was by organizing community gardens, because I needed money. I need cash to be able to buy land. And so I was doing lots of community gardens, and in cities where you can make lots of money and organize lots of other people, you can always find spaces to do things you like, but it's not so easy to conceal chickens in your backyard. And so as much as I adore them, I really had to stay away with them. But bees, they were something else for me because they're so hip. You know, everybody likes talking about them. We're all sort of aware of the honeybee crisis, or like the fact that our pollinators are going. And so in my quest, I liked bees because they were mobile. I could hide them in my backyard and usually bribe a neighbor with honey. You know, everybody likes something sweet to eat on occasion. And so, yeah, so I started keeping bees. I really like their cute little buggy faces. And I like that they take up so little space, even though they move around a really big space. And they're transportable. So in my first move from Alberta to BC, I found that I could always easily sell off a few hives. People are really into bees, so they're easy to let go of. And I could stuff 1 or 2 into the back of my canopy of my truck and move them from one part of the country to another. So the first time I did this was a real learning experience. And there's so many funny stories about it, but I'll only share one. So on my first official move, I filled my truck with everything I owned. I stuffed a hive of bees in there. I closed the canopy. I started driving. I drove through the night because bees are really active during the day, and I didn't want them moving around or disturbing other things. But what was happening when the sun came up, and every time I stopped, they were like starting to pop out of my canopy, and I didn't really realize that this was happening until I got on the ferry for Vancouver Island. And so I pulled up, you know, it was about sunrise, it was still chilly and foggy. The bees were kind of crawling around inside the canopy of my truck. I drove my truck onto the ferry. That stillness, that lack of movement, they were all really provoked by that. And so they all started coming out and exploring in the canopy of my truck, which didn't really bother me so much. But then I realized as I was sitting in my truck, exhausted from the drive, that people were like losing their minds as they passed by my truck. And the bees, being the curious little insects that they are, were popping out the holes in the corner of my canopy and tailgate. And so I didn't know what to do or how to be responsive to that. So I just grabbed the roll of tape that I had on the dashboard of my truck, and I went outside and I thought, a few wayward bees in a giant colony, they just don't matter. So I started taping them in, but what they were doing is gathering up the tape, so all I could hear is the loud buzzing. So people were walking by my truck and there was just this audible like zzz. So they were really angry. But they weren't escaping anymore, and they weren't causing other people trouble. Yeah. made the crossing to Vancouver Island and drove a couple hours to the farm where I was able to unload my bees. They were really angry at that point. I got stung in the face. So half my face swelled up, and I had to go to a permaculture design course, and so I ended up unloading them and driving down to Duncan with all my face swollen up, where I met Mel, who actually lives in Kitkatla, where I live. I just ran into him the other day. He didn't recognize me. He remembered me, is the story. And so that brought a lot of thought and reflection on my part. I guess people like to feel good about bees. Like, we've all heard about the pollination crisis. And what we don't realize is that they're not native to this part of the world. And so as much as we enjoy them, they actually do a lot of things that are really detrimental in the environment. So that act of driving across the country, I was distributing disease, I was emptying out pollinators that don't actually belong in this part of the world. And and encouraging invasive species. Honeybees favor some plants over others. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be mindful of my time here. I did have a few other thoughts on this that I'd love to share after as a fact. But I mostly wanted to say, like, when we're talking about homesteading and we get really excited about the things that we like and enjoy and appreciate about different animals, we should be aware of the environment around us and how those things interact with it. And like what we can do to like support them or support other creatures in that world while we're dumping other ones into it or making changes in our gardens and with the animals we bring in. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Thank you.